Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of How to Renovate. This week we're going to be talking about lighting, and we're talking about how and when to plan your lighting. Now, during the renovation process, it can be quite overwhelming. There are so many decisions to make on a renovation project, and this lighting planning episode will just hopefully help you to clarify and plan exactly where you want your lighting and really how you'd like it to function, because lighting is it's so important in a project. It's one of those things I find where if it's not done right, you can kind of walk into a room and feel something doesn't feel right, or it makes you feel uneasy, or the color of the light isn't quite right. I think it's so important to get the lighting right, because it really affects our mood and how we feel in a space. And if it's it comes down to quite a few things. It needs to be positioned correctly, it needs to be functional, or if it's not placed properly for function, it can be really frustrating to use a room. It can add to the atmosphere or take away from the atmosphere. So there's so much to think about when it comes to lighting, and you really need to think about it early on. It's not something, definitely not something you want to start thinking about when the contractors are on site and the electrician's there and they're going, where do you want this light? Where do you want the spots in here? Where do you want the wall lights? No, do not do that. You will stress yourself out. Think about it so early on. I think, right from the planning stage, you got to think about the lighting. It's really important. It's one of those things I find as a designer that when you walk into a space and it feels good and it feels considered, and sometimes you don't quite know why, you just feel good in the space. And I felt like a lot of times that comes down to the lighting, if it's been lit properly, if it's been lit well. So it's such a major part of a renovation, and I think it's also one of these things that people don't really think of. They just think about it as an afterthought. They're like so focused on the space and getting the space right and the layout and how much space they're going to add on to their home, and not really thinking about how important the lighting is. It really can be an afterthought sometimes. Sometimes I go to projects and people one of the main common regrets I find is that they didn't think about the lighting early on, and they've spent all this money and they've got this extra space and this new kitchen or new bathroom or new living room, and the lighting's just not right, and it's really expensive to put it right after the fact. And so many people just live with the bad lighting. So I urge you, listen to this episode, think about your lighting, and just get it right. It will give you that little something special, that little something extra to your renovation that you perhaps didn't think you needed. But I would say listen and really follow these, and you will have a really lovely space and a functional space as well. So let's get started. So as you know by now, everything I teach falls under my 5-pillar process. And like I've just been saying, lighting falls under pillar 1, planning, right at the start. So pillar 1, planning. If you want to learn more about the renovation process, listen at the end. There's a free resource for you, a free video. So go and check that out and learn all about the correct sequence of a renovation process. So let's start with when to plan your lighting. So I've already covered a little bit of this, but start right at the beginning. So I would say as soon as your floor plans are kind of nailed down and you know the new layout of your home, and you've even already thought about where your furniture will be placed, that is the stage you start thinking about the lighting. Because then you know how the space will be used. You can visualize how the space will be used. Where will the sofa be? Do you need light on either side of the sofa? Where will the kitchen island be? You need light above the kitchen island for practicality, for task lighting. So you can see how when you know where things are going to be, you need to plan the lighting carefully around that. And then you can also plan for the different types of lighting. So where you need bright lighting, you can plan for task lighting, so you can do things like cooking and reading. When you want to watch TV and have a relaxing atmosphere, you can plan for that. You can plan for perhaps smaller wall lights on that are dimmable. If you just want some ambient light around the room, some soft lighting around the room in the evening when you're using the whole space, you can plan for that. So you can see how kind of knowing how you're going to use a space affects the lighting. But you don't know how you're going to use the space until you have your layout and your furniture plan sorted. So that's the sequence that I like to do it in, and it does work quite well. So just imagining how you're going to use it, it's an easy way to place your lighting, because you can picture yourself using the space, living there, moving from room to room, how you move from room to room, perhaps where you would almost automatically go to switch on and switch off the lighting. So it really gives you kind of a visual way. Your floor plans and your furniture plan give you a visual way to start planning your lighting. So that is my top advice, is to not leave it to mid-project, to not leave it as an afterthought or to chance, to really think about it right at your floor planning stage. And that is when you should start to plan your lighting. So let's move on to the next one. And we're now going to move on to how to plan your lighting. I am going to give you 7 things to plan and consider before you start your renovation. So I know I'm banging on about it, but before you start. So let's go through 7 things you can do. So number 1 is that basic floor plan. So use your floor plan, whether you've drawn it yourself, whether you've had an architect involved, whether you have some old estate agent floor plans. Get your hands on a floor plan, figure out where your furniture will be placed, and then you can use this as a base to mark your lighting. So physically take a piece of paper, and I would say use markings. There's some typical keys and kind of symbols that you can use. I'm going to go through. I have a freebie for you to do with lighting. I'll talk about it a bit later on in the episode. But there's a freebie for you that has so much information to help you plan your lighting at the start of your renovation. So I will mention that later, and I will also link to it in the show notes. But number 1 is get that basic floor plan in your hands. And then number 2 is the furniture placement we've been talking about. So once you have your floor plan, think really carefully about how you will use the space, where the furniture will be placed, kind of where your main sofa will be, how your kitchen will be planned, where your kitchen island is, where you might have a reading space, a relaxing space, a working space. And then you need to plan your lighting accordingly, where you need bright light, where you might need dimmer light, where you need control of the lighting, so where you need to be able to dim the lights or turn them up. So the furniture placement is something that really is, it's really quite essential, but it's a step that lots of people skip or don't even think about. And when they move into the space, the newly renovated space, sometimes they haven't even thought about where exactly the furniture will go. And then the lighting's all wrong because it's not been planned around where the furniture was going to be. So really think about your furniture placement, and you could even go even deeper, you know, at this early stage, if you know the measurements of the furniture you already have or that you're going to be purchasing, placing those on the floor plan and placing the lighting around those, or arranging the lighting around those, will make it even better. So just get as much information as you can at that floor plan stage. get your floor plans filled out, and then just carefully plan your lighting around that. And if you're using an architect, they can help you. So sometimes they will put lighting suggestions on the plan, but sometimes they won't. So work with your architect, if you're using one, to really plan well for your lighting. It is one of those things that just is going to elevate your space. It will give it that considered feel that perhaps you wouldn't have gotten otherwise without really going through these and considering them very carefully. So moving on to the next one, we're going to look at number 3, which is layering light. So this is one that I absolutely love. It also is one of those, it kind of gives a home that designer feel without really that much effort, with just a little bit of thought, because you're going to be doing the work anyway. The electrician's going to be fitting the cables anyway. You just need to think about it and plan it a bit, and you can really elevate how it all kind of comes together and creates different atmospheres of different times of day and different uses that you need. So the layering light is basically having different lighting come on at different times, and you can either dial it down so you can only have 1 or 2 sources of light on at the same time, or you can dial it up, you can have all the lighting on at the same time. And it's about control. Layering light is about control, so you can decide the level of light you want, the atmosphere you want in the room at that stage. And the way you can do this is by your circuits. And by circuits, I mean, really simply, because it is really simple, all it is like the lights that switch on and switch off at the same time. So let's say, for example, you want your wall lights and your pendant light to come on at the same time. That will be on one switch, that is one circuit. And then perhaps you have some other rooms, you have some under counter LED lights, let's say, in the same room, and you want that to come on completely independently on another switch. So that is another circuit. So that is just really simply what it means. And you can then control your lighting a lot better. And I think that is the thing that gives the space that kind of bit of a special feel, is when you can control the lighting, you can control the atmosphere for whatever might be happening in the room at the time. And it's also really functional. So it's not only about atmosphere, and although that's lovely to have in a space, and when the atmosphere is wrong and the lighting's too bright, or it's not quite the right colour, if it's too cold, that can really affect the way we feel and how we feel in the space. So really getting that right and having control over it is just so important. So I'd always suggest making a list of each circuit you want in each room and saying exactly which lights you want to come on at the same time. Again, that free resource I'm going to give you, the lighting checklist and worksheet, there's so much information in there. You can use it to plan your lighting. It will help you to plan your circuits and layer your light. So do go and check that out. I'm going to link to it in the show notes, like I said. Okay, moving on to number 4, which is switches and controls. So this one's quite straightforward. Just think about it. Just mark where you want your switches and your controls in your floor plan. Again, if you don't think about it before, you'll be mid-renovation, or the contractor will just put them where he or she thinks they need to go. And, you know, it's frustrating when you're using a space and you feel like the switches should be in a certain place, but they're not there. They're a bit awkward to get to. So just thinking about where your switches will go, if there might be anything else that needs to go on that wall. For example, storage. Will storage be built on that wall? In which case the switch needs to go somewhere else. So it's just thinking about, again, how you will use the space. So back to the floor plan, back to the furniture placement. There's a natural way, I feel like a flow, when we move around a room and where we almost naturally reach out, where we think, our brains think the light switches should be, and how we naturally want to reach and turn them on or off. So again, just imagine yourself in the space or walk through your existing space and just kind of figure out where you want those. Moving on to number 5, which is artwork placement. So this is a really lovely one because I feel like this is something people don't, again, think of doing, and it's so simple, but it just adds something so special. Just one directional artwork spotlight on the wall with a beautiful piece of artwork underneath it, and that light illuminating the artwork, perhaps in the evening when everything else is dimmed, just gives such a lovely atmosphere. So again, if you have some artwork already that you perhaps have neglected to put up yet, or you feel it's not quite in the right place, think about it now. Think about it at floor plan stage, and think about it at furniture placement stage. Perhaps the artwork is on the wall, perhaps there's a lovely console underneath, and then you can light that setup with the light I just talked about, the directional spot illuminating the artwork. So these little things, and just thinking about these things before, will just elevate your design, elevate your home, just give it that little something special. I mean, after all, you're doing a big renovation, you're spending a lot of money, and if you're ripping into walls anyway and putting in new electrics anyway, think about these things, make it the best it can be, so for your own enjoyment and your family's enjoyment. So I really recommend this one if you want to do that. And it doesn't only have to be paintings, it can be, prints or any kind of interesting sculpture, or perhaps a shelf with a few decorative objects on it. All of those things, just thought through from the beginning, will really elevate your design. Moving on to number 6, which is light fixtures and fittings. Okay, so fair enough, you might not know right at the beginning of your renovation project exactly which pendant lights and wall lights you want in every single room, but it's good to be prepared with a general list. So for example, if you know that you want 1 pendant light and 2 wall lights in the living room, just as an example, at least you can put those on your plans, and the contractor can quote for installing those, and you can give a rough idea of the type of fixture you're thinking of. And then that alone is quite a good starting point for your lighting design. And also, if you're thinking that you do want a statement light fixture, so perhaps you have something quite dramatic that you found that you want to have above your island, but perhaps it's quite a heavy piece, perhaps it's quite a heavy light fixture, in which case the contractor needs to know that. They need to know that if they are hanging very heavy light fixtures, that this actual ceiling will need extra support. So at quoting and construction stage, that light fixture that you've chosen will determine what structure needs to go above the kitchen island. So they might need to add extra joists, they might need to reinforce the ceiling with plywood. So knowing and thinking ahead about what your lighting will be will prevent these kind of changes along the line. So let's say, for example, the contractor didn't know you were wanting to have quite a big heavy light fixture and they didn't reinforce the ceiling. Let's say, for example, they'd already plastered the ceiling and they'd already built the structure, and then you have the light fixture delivered and they say, well, we didn't know this light fixture was going to be this big and this heavy. We need to now rip open the ceiling, rebuild that, replaster it, and replasterboard it, which is going to cost you quite a lot of money. So just planning, thinking about the lighting early on, where you want kind of statement lighting, where you want wall lighting, where you want kind of hidden LED strip lighting. All of those things will, just knowing them from the start will help with your planning, it will help with your costing, it will help with the communication with your contractor. So just make sure that you kind of have an idea of your fixtures and fittings if you don't know exactly what you want at this early stage. Okay, moving on to the last one, number 7. So number 7 is glazing and natural light. So this is a bit of an odd one. So obviously now in modern times, we are having so much glazing in our homes. It's amazing. We want the light. We want the kind of modern feel. We want to see outdoors into the garden, which is all amazing in the daytime. But if you don't think about your glazing and how it will be in the evening, you could end up living in a home with these large expanses of just kind of black glass in the evening if you don't consider how to plan the lighting around these large panes of glass, whether it be in the walls, in the ceilings. So if you're doing a modern extension or modern renovation with lots of glazing, really think about this, because those spaces at night can feel quite cold and quite dark if you don't plan for it. So a few tips I have here and what I've done before in projects is a way to kind of combat that is around large skylights, for example, in the ceiling. I like to include a hidden LED strip, so that can be kind of built into the architecture around the skylight structure. So again, you can see why thinking about this now, early on, before you get to construction phase, because let's say your skylight's already been installed and you say to the contractor, what about light here? And they haven't built the little recess to actually hold the LED strip, which needs to be carefully planned and installed and around the skylight. So you need to really think about these things in advance, and it's just to save yourself the hassle, the time, the money, the changes down the line. So think about this. It's I find it's something that lots of people don't consider, and they find when they move into their new home in the evenings that it just does not feel good. So it's really important. I mean, large glazing, so expensive. You're spending all that money, all that time on creating this amazing space during the day, but then in the evening it's lacking. It's not feeling like you want it to feel. Another tip I have is if you have kind of large glass doors looking out onto the garden, a way I combat that one is to either light, if you have a ledge or an overhang over the glass on the exterior, you can add lighting there. Or another way is to actually light the garden itself. So you can get these amazing uplighters, you can light them up trees, up plants, foliage, your flower boxes. Think about lighting the actual outdoors so that when the lights, when it gets dark, you can turn the garden lights on, and then that gives it almost that kind of magical, kind of fairy-like feel if a garden's lit up and you're looking at it from the inside. So do consider that glazing. I love glazing, I love light. I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa, and for me, adding large panels of glazing, large panels of light is everything. I just thrive in a home where there's lots of light, and I think loads of people feel that. It kind of adds to our well-being when we can see light and we can feel the warmth coming in. But you do need to think about that for the evening as well, and just kind of counteract that with some clever lighting design, which I hope I've given you in this episode. That brings us nicely to the end, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please go and subscribe. It just helps everyone else who wants some lighting information or advice, or any other renovation advice. It just helps them find us, and it just helps this podcast get out there a little bit more. So thank you if you're about to do that. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next episode. Bye for now. So this is where you can find the free download that I've mentioned a few times in the episode. So if you go to southplaystudio.com/freebies, you will find there a selection of freebies, but if you scroll down, you will find this one called The 7 Things to Consider When Planning Your Lighting. This is such a useful guide. So go there, download it. It has some examples of a floor plan, a furniture plan. It has a lighting key with the symbols I mentioned. It also has a checklist so that you can plan your lighting, or it has these things you need to consider, the 7 things you need to consider. It also has a worksheet so you can plan your circuit, which will help you to layer your lighting better. So do go and grab this if you're planning a renovation. It will help you in every room to plan the lighting, just so that you get that little something special out of your renovation project. For more information on my 5-pillar process for successful renovation, you can go directly to southplacestudio.com/pillars, where you'll find an introduction to the process which covers each of the pillars and what they cover. We also have a number of other free renovation resources. Go now to southplacestudio.com/freebies. I have created some amazing freebies for you there. There is one on the process, like we just said. There is one on planning permission. There is one on kitchen design. There is another one on lighting planning. Go and check those out. There's so much free information there to help you with your renovation.